everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed Ken's presentation on nonprofit trends. Very informative, a lot of good content that he has for everybody as usual. I welcome back. I hope you got a chance to stretch your legs, maybe get a breath of fresh air. It's still kind of okay out right now. Get some coffee, tea, answer some emails and sit down and relax because we have a great program for you today. This is a fabulous panel discussion about a hot trending topic, information technology concerns impacting nonprofit organizations, and you're going to hear a lot of things today. I am Shari Diamond. I'm a partner at Cerini Associates, where I help oversee the internal audit department. That's where we focus on assessing internal controls and operations and make recommendations to strengthen the control environment, which is why this panel is so important to me. This entails looking at the effectiveness and efficiencies of your operations, compliance with laws, rules, regulations, and don't forget your policies. And all of these things are concerned with the protection of confidential information or just critical information about your business. So it is really important that you understand how to identify these risks that impact you and what you can do to reduce or mitigate them. So with me today with fabulous panel, I have no particular order, but I have Joe Horowitz. He is the Director of Compliance and Audit at Stetson Cybergroup. They provide various cybersecurity consulting services. Jim Doran, he is the Area Vice President of AJ Gallagher, and he specializes in providing cybersecurity insurance policies. Last, but certainly not least, is Destiny Bowers, and she is responsible for professional services, cloud and CISO services, I hope I said that right, at RoundTable Technology, where they provide a full range of managed IT support services, and they also specialize in working with nonprofit organizations so they understand what you are going through. I have worked with these three individuals on many occasions, and I'm very proud to announce a recently published IT guidebook that we all put together along with some other individuals that contributed extremely valuable information. I'd say definitely check out this guidebook out. Hopefully the link is going to be posted in the chat. It's on our website. Like myself, Jim, Joe, and Destiny are passionate about the work they do and are big in providing information. So after the session, I strongly encourage you all to check out their websites. There's just a lot of good stuff, a lot of good resources, a lot of really excellent material that you can learn. Before we get started, obviously this session is being recorded, so I just wanted to tell you about that. I see that somebody posted something in the chat. You'll see on the bottom of your screen a little chat button. We would like you to post any questions there. It will help us to understand what's going on and what things might be of concern to you. And I'm going to be monitoring that and making sure that those questions get sent to our panel. So to start, we just have a quick poll. Do you think we can get that poll launched up? Good. We just want to find out who's in the room and what what you might be concerned with. So we have different categories. We also have all of the above because some people are just do all functions, and we get that. If you're other, maybe put in the chat what you're what you're doing. Maybe there's some other role that you're playing, and we'd be able to tailor our answers better. Okay, I think that's good. I think so. A lot of people are, obviously in the financial position and CFO, controller, and accountant position. Not too many IT people in the room. We got some board members also. Appreciate that. So people who have fiduciary responsibility, who are involved in the fiscal aspects, obviously compliance and stuff like that as well. I also had a question to ask everybody, if you could put it in the chat. I guess what you're looking to get out of this session, or what your top concerns are with cybersecurity. It could be general security. You can have breaches, ransomware prevention. Maybe you're interested in cyber insurance. Maybe you're interested in compliance and confidentiality, security assessments, online donations. Just trying to get a sense of what people, what your top concern is when we mention the word, cybersecurity or information technology. If people could put some stuff in the chat, that would be good. Breaches, that's unfortunate. Anybody concerned about, backup and recovery, disaster recovery, business continuity, donations, credit card processing? Great. All right, well, keep putting them in. Liability control is huge. Online donations, yep. Credit card, we're seeing a lot of that too. So hopefully we're going to be able to talk about a lot of these different things. Client and data protection is huge. Many of you are dealing with a lot of confidential information that's required to be protected by law. So what is involved in that, in that kind of protection? We're going to get started with each of the panelists introducing themselves and talking about their role in working with nonprofits and technology. We're going to start with Destiny, then have Joe, and then Jim. So Destiny, take it away, please.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I am Destiny Bowers. I am the Virtual Chief Information Security Officer for RoundTable Technology. And as Shari mentioned, we are mission-driven to work with nonprofits. We'd say for the last decade, worked with hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits. And one of the things about RoundTable is that we are very security-minded. We understand the nonprofit base and a lot of the challenges that they specifically have, and a lot of guidance that they need when it comes to cybersecurity, particularly since so many organizations can be targeted because they are mission-based or because of the areas of the world that they work in. And so we're always looking to help them break new ground, to have improvements, particularly in what we like to call our basics and fundamentals. That building block of security that every organization needs to help further them, move them up. We have our little Maslow's pyramid of cybersecurity that we like to equate things to, and sort of help move them up to the top so they can stop worrying about the fundamentals and really focus on their missions.
Great. Joe, how about you?
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody. Joe Horowitz from Stetson Cybergroup. A little background about myself. I'm the Director of Compliance and Audit here. I spent a good part of my 20+ years as an auditor, starting off in financial and operational. I was an accounting major, believe it or not, and then led into IT and cybersecurity. Our organization, we help school districts, we help nonprofits, we help municipalities with risk assessments regarding cybersecurity. We do PCI compliance risk assessments for those who are looking for a credit card. We also work very closely with all kinds of regulations in New York State, the New York Shield Act. We also do penetration tests. We do really the full gamut. We take a very holistic approach to cybersecurity. And my team really looks at the human side of things, helping out with the education and the phishing and things of that nature.
Great. Jim.
Thank you, Shari. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Doran. I'm from Gallagher. We're a full-scale risk management and insurance firm. I specialize in helping and assisting nonprofit and social service organizations implement and monitor their cyber insurance. So what happens if we do all these things that help protect and mitigate against loss, but if something does happen, what do you do? And that's where we help our clients and nonprofit and social service organizations direct them to address some of these incidents that actually occur.
Great, thank you so much. The number one culprit, I would say, seems to be people in the organization as far as, any kind of attacks or breaches or just, things that just can go wrong. So it's not really a system per se. What would be a great way to spread the message that people need to practice controls and understand security controls and cybersecurity and awareness? Maybe what are some things that you have seen in each of your areas? Any one person want to take it to start? Joe, you want to kind of?
Yeah. So, we find that the tone really comes from the top of the organization, where they really direct the people as how they need to control, have controls in place. You can put all the technologies in place, but what we've been seeing is probably around 85 to 90% of most breaches today, because technologies are in place, are from phishing emails. For those who don't know what phishing emails, it looks like a legitimate email. You click on the email, but not just so much you click on the email, you're clicking on the link that's in the email, and it's getting all your information, getting into your systems and doing all that kind of stuff. So it really is, we try to do education for school districts. We try to actually give webinars. We do stuff like that. But it's really talking to the whole gamut of everybody in the organization. They're having them realize it's not an IT issue. IT just is there to make sure that you're up and running on a day-to-day basis. They're not there to protect your cybersecurity. That's not what they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. You want to have availability and you want to have your constant running of your business. That's what IT is there for. So you really need to have everybody involved in this program, a holistic program of cybersecurity within your organization.
Right, thank you. And Dusty, I know in your organization in RoundTable Technology, you do a lot of training and a lot of amazing videos on this subject. Maybe you want to speak about how, the it's been transferred, that information, and maybe some feedback that you're getting from some of your organizations that you work with?
Yeah, great. And I have to 100% agree with Joseph. A lot of this is about security culture. It really needs to be an organizational mindset, an organizational culture that is in there supporting people and not dismissive of people's concerns or not dismissive of events that happens. You need to embrace we are here to support you. But ongoing education is one of those things. We always liken it sort of to a fitness program. It would be great if we all had to do it once and then we would be fit for the rest of our lives, but that's not how it works. So it really comes down to I think two pieces. One is the reiteration and enforcement of your learning. Things like fish testing, things like ongoing education programs, webinars like these, but making it engaging, making it exciting, something that interests people instead of having a little bit of the people being talked at about security, people being a part of the conversation about security. And then, you do need to have policies and procedures in place as well on the other side. And that is something that does have more of an organizational enforcement, because you might have regulations and compliance that you need to meet, and people need to have an understanding of those. So having someone in an organization who maybe can't always support a compliance officer, but having someone who's able to give you guidance about upcoming regulations, new laws, things that are out there, and then helping you build out that framework so you can develop an internal process and policies to keep yourself in line with these and in line with the changes as they come up.
Right, that's really well said, and it's a lot of information to digest there. So I think a lot of people are going to hear some pearls of wisdom here today. It is being recorded. I'm going to venture to guess that a lot of people are going to want to play these things back. So Jim, from a cybersecurity insurance perspective, what are the requirements that you're looking for companies to have in place, along with preventing those kind of breaches? What are some of the tips that you can relay to our viewers today that, is really something that they should have in place in order to have effective cybersecurity insurance and mitigate some of those risks?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing today is we're seeing an ever-changing insurance marketplace. We've all heard of the absolute increase in ransomware incidents, breaches, wire fraud cases. All of these things have significantly impacted the insurance marketplace, where several carriers have exited the market. We're seeing significant increases in rates. We're seeing premiums in many cases go up. And what we're also seeing is we're seeing a baseline of protections that are being requested by the insurance companies. If you don't have those baseline items inside and incorporated into your program, in many cases, the insurance companies are not offering the insurance any longer. Those would be things such as multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, along with a number of other things. The key here is to be able to document everything that you're doing from an IT cybersecurity perspective. If you can document it and we can tell a good story to an insurance carrier, there's a better chance of coming out with better terms and conditions. Because a lot of the things that are changing are retentions or deductibles, sublimits for certain coverages such as social engineering or computer fraud. A lot of the terms and conditions are changing. So all that an organization can do to document and show and demonstrate accurate recurring trainings, not just a 15-minute webinar once a year, but legitimate ongoing training, as well as document all of the protections and protocols that are in place that will significantly help the process moving forward.
Right, documentation is huge, and I think that that's something that it just takes time, and people don't want to make that time or make that effort to document procedures. That's kind of typical audit question that we'd ask on any type of thing that we're reviewing. We're looking for historical knowledge being memorialized. We're looking for policies to really inform the users, what is really important to them. They kind of dictate what should be happening within an organization, and then just general procedures. We're seeing a shift in employment. We're seeing a lot of baby boomers, retiring. So, how does this information get transferred? We talk about having this stuff documented. We have some pretty small organizations out there that are now having to get leaner and meaner. And, we're talking about what Ken mentioned, looking at your staffing and looking at cutting costs. What is an approach? How do you do this? How do you try to start to document your systems and document what you have in place and know what you know and know what you don't know? How do you kind of start to do that? Destiny, you might want to start with that.
Yes. Well, the great news is there are a lot of organizations who are based around that and who offer a lot of free tools. One of them, for example, is the excuse me, the Center for Internet Security, as well as, which is known as CIS, as well as NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And both of these will offer a lot of frameworks that allow you to give yourself controls to say, here are the things that we need to do as an organization. So they've sort of broken this down for you into bite-sized chunks. So it gives you a way to move forward with your learning, but also to move forward with documentation and the steps that you're going to need to take to meet some of these security requirements, but also to give yourself basic good cybersecurity. And some of them even have automated tools that will allow you to input your evidence, input things like proof of our training. There's a lot of platforms out there that you can also get at a rather low cost that will do things like phish testing for you, ongoing cybersecurity training for you, that will allow you to get reporting and metrics and other evidence that you can present as well. So there's a lot of people out there in the security space who are trying to do everything they can to improve security, and therefore offering a lot of tools and a lot of support for people who may not be able to throw thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars at solutions or at organizations. As long as you can hopefully prioritize a little bit of your human capital time with internal staff to work some of these, they really are trying to make it as easy as possible for folks to move along on the security path on their own when they're unable to get guidance from someone else.
Right. And I know, Joe, we spoke offline about like some things you could be doing, that you can implement that really don't cost anything, as far as improving your cybersecurity stature. Maybe you want to talk about a few of those things too.
Right, absolutely. As Jim said, MFA is really very important, multi-factor authentication. It's really not that hard. Maybe it takes an extra couple of seconds to authenticate your access to a system. It doesn't really take a lot of time to do this extra work. Definitely the education and training. I know for the free stuff, it's just knowing the threats that are out there, looking at threat feeds, knowing what's a threat to your organization, things of that nature. But going back to Destiny's point about the policy, policies are very important. They're the governance. They really oversee your entire organization, how it's supposed to run. Yes, and NIST and CIS really give you a great framework of what should be as far as controls, but they could also be very overwhelming. I've been, and Shari, you and I have probably audited and I've probably written policies for the last 20 years. And that's what we do a lot now today for a lot of smaller companies, because they really don't have the bandwidth or the staff to really understand what to put in these policies. So it's really important to put down on paper and put down these processes and look at them every year of what you do as a company. And when you finally have to be under some kind of regulatory compliance, that's the first thing they're looking for. Absolutely.
Right.
You really need to document your policies and follow this on a regular basis. It's really important. I saw a question come up about sending test emails to staff about cyber policy. Probably phishing tests is probably one of the easiest things you can do. And I find it way more effective than the actual trainings every year. You can send out phishing tests as often as you want. The trainings, people tend to forget. You're right, Jim, 15 minutes once a year is certainly 100% not enough. And I've seen that in so many places. But the phishing tests really gauge how well people are understanding and knowing what to look for in any kind of scam or anything, because it's really the human side of things that you want to look for at this point.
Right, and I think there was something where if you had too much information coming from your IT director or whoever's responsible for disseminating that information, if you see it too often, it becomes annoying. I think Ken mentioned that too in his thing. When you're looking for donations, it's the same type of thing. If you're constantly doing something and you're putting everything in all caps, people are just not going to listen, to the effects. And the problem is it just takes one person to click on something. The hackers are getting relentless. I mean, absolutely relentless. Finding out information, finding many different ways. They're actually, trying to find out your cell phone information. and finding ways to triangulate how they can get information about you. Someone was putting about MFA as the lowest hanging, it's an obvious thing there too. And I guess, Jim, from a way to mitigate risks, a way to lower those risks or transfer the risk, how is that happening with cybersecurity insurance? I mean, what kind of levels and, what are people trying to protect? What are you seeing in the nonprofit world, or what can a smaller company do with not a lot of, funds?
Absolutely. So I think the critical piece here, just to note from Destiny and Joe's conversation, is cybersecurity is not convenient. It is not convenient. It is a process. It is something that needs to be implemented in over time. And from an insurance standpoint, it really a contractual risk standpoint is transferring risk from one party to another and is trying to transfer as much of that risk out as possible. So if there's any partner that can have a contract in place to provide a transfer of risk and work with an attorney or someone in the legal field to determine what's the best way to structure that document, to be able to transfer as much risk out as possible. And that's not only for cyber, but that's for the entire organization as a whole. So anytime that there's a third party working on your behalf or working for you, even down to an HVAC contractor or a landscaper, there should always be some sort of transfer of risk. So when it comes to the cyber side of things, transferring that risk down and helping mitigate and build a comprehensive program from the ground up is critical. And from an insurance standpoint, it really is almost, I wouldn't say mandatory at this point, but the number of claims that we've seen, not necessarily full-blown breaches, but from a social engineering perspective, from wire fraud and changes of instructions via email have been rampant over the last 8 months, and they're getting more and more sophisticated as you go. So as we've talked here before, the training is critical. So there is no such thing as too much training. It's just how effective can that training be?
Right. And I think there's just a lot of different components as far as what is a good plan. I mean, I think that's a question that, we get asked a lot as accountants, and auditors. How do I know that I'm getting a bang for the buck? I mean, you're going to get this question from a cybersecurity insurance. Why should I get that? What is it really protecting? How do I know that it's really protecting? If they don't require some kind of an assessment being done, am I really getting something or not? That goes into Joe's area. How do you do an assessment? Into Destiny, how do I support people? Maybe you could just sort of talk about a good plan or what's an effective cybersecurity insurance policy that people should be looking for, some key tips, and then we'll talk about the other things as well.
Absolutely. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, good, Jim. You start off, please.
Okay, so just from a insurance policy perspective, it's critical to work with a partner broker that specializes in cyber, that understands the changes, because there are so many different carriers that call different coverages by different names, and it can get very confusing. So one company may call it data breach, another may call it cyber and privacy insurance, and that goes down the line. There's typically 10 to 15 different coverages on a cyber policy, and it's critical to understand what is what's covering what, and focus on the things that are sublimited, meaning things like social engineering, computer fraud, business interruption, all of those critical components, and understanding before you make a decision what coverage you actually have.
Right, and that brings me into where Joe does his assessments, and then we're going to go into Destiny on what she does as an outsourced IT provider. So Joe, I mean, we're talking about assessments, we're talking about vulnerability assessments, we're talking about exposing ourselves a little bit there. I think it's about knowing what kind of data you have, knowing what data needs to be protected, knowing what laws are impacting you. And I would say, kind of walk us through, how we can marry everything together here.
Right. So first things first, you really should know if you are subject to any of these regulations, whether it be New York State or federal or whatever the case might be. There are frameworks and guidelines for a lot of regulations that tell you have to have certain things in place. We actually like to come and do assessments really based on the whole NIST and CIS guidelines and the list of controls, because we find it a lot more extensive. And we know down the road that at some point PCI and all these other ones are really going to expand to those categories and that breadth of those frameworks. And as far as the cyber insurance goes, we work with a lot of cyber insurance companies that we see the questionnaires, they're like 4, 5, 6, some of them 10 pages long of requirements that all of these companies have to have. Now, I know it's a daunting task. There are things we do. So we come in, we do these risk assessments. We really just don't hand a piece of paper as a checklist. We do interviews. We really review your configurations. We really take a very large approach to your organization. We're very in depth. We have myself we do audit and look at controls. We have pen testers. So if you need a pen test, a penetration test, really what it does is you have these ethical hackers who really just try to poke holes into your systems and see where your real threats and vulnerabilities are. Quick story on that, which we did one in a school district a while back, and it turns out they had an open line to the actual city around them. So we actually got into the city. So you never know where your third party lines are. And we had, of course, we reported that to them, better we found it than someone else. So yes, we come in and we do assessments of the controls, of your technologies, and do all these things to really identify the gaps that you have in order to further protect yourself. Now, I know a lot of places and not a lot of people here are on budgets. And what we really do is we provide recommendations that really are customized to your business. We're not going to recommend, say, a CrowdStrike, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we'll see what you have in place and try to give you some recommendations that would really fit your organization, because that's, listen, you can't fit a square peg into a round hole. And I think we're a company that really understands that, and especially in cybersecurity, any protections is better than no protections.
Right.
And going back to just the technologies and also the education, the phishing, all of it really combined holistically will really give you a better chance of mitigating that risk.
Right. I think the biggest message I want to get across is that you could see, I mean, these are just 3 different groups of people that are involved. There are many others, and obviously you're going to probably say, well, I think I need legal involved. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think what we wrote in the beginning of the guidebook is it takes a village, it really does. These are not just an IT problem. So Destiny, from your role, who do you kind of have to work with? What do you kind of need from your clients in order to ensure that they are operating effectively and efficiently? And how do we, kind of marry everything together, to have a robust and strong environment?
Great. Yeah, so there's actually a bit of overlap with what Stetson Cybergroup does and with what RoundTable does. We do a lot of assessments, and we will also help people work with an understanding of what they have. You can't protect what you don't know. So really looking at your assets, and every organization does need to take a little bit of time to look at their assets, and then also evaluate on those assets of how much risk is there to this? What is the likelihood that something is going to happen to this data? And is there any way that I can either remove or, to Jim's point, transfer this risk? Are you collecting data? Is there information that you don't need to collect? It was just something that someone did in the past, and you're sort of going down the rabbit hole of following old practices. And we can say, hey, we don't need social security numbers. We don't need this information. So therefore, if we don't collect it, we don't have that risk. But what we'll do is that we'll help people with things like data classification. We'll help them understand what they're collecting. And then we can also help them implement some of that low-hanging fruit. When you work with managed service providers, one that is security minded is going to help get things in place like your MFA, your isolated administrative accounts, your EDR and MDR solutions. So part of a package that you're looking for when you're looking at IT services is someone who understands what you need as an organization in the guise of your budgetary requirements. And when it comes to nonprofits, there are a lot of discounted tools, and we have an awareness of that. And that's why we love working with nonprofits, is to be able to go, hey, we can get you freebies. We can get you things at half price. Everyone loves a bargain. And if that bargain is going to make you more secure at the same time, that appeals to, the finance people, of course, but also, with who we need to work with. A lot of times it is the informational stakeholders in the organization. You'll have people who are accidental techies who might be working on the technology side. But people do sometimes equate security with technology. And I think to a point that was made previously is that no, it's an entire organizational thing. So we might actually get more information about what you need to protect from a program officer or someone who's, you know, working in development, as opposed to just the you know, person who's dealing with their break fix technology within the organization. So it really does take that village. It does take input from everyone in an organization to have what we call user stories. When you are working with your data, when you're working with your outside partners or taking your donations, how are you working with them? And the lens that you view that through is going to be different than the lens that someone else in your team or in your organization might see it. And then we take all of that and we put it together so we can get that 360 view of everything that's going on with your data, with your organization, and help find ways to protect that for you.
Right, the flow of information and understanding that, you know, not everybody has that ability to have that view. So it's unique people. I think in internal audit too, we're one of the few people in an organization when we come in, you know, because we're looking at the different dependencies of information. So we're trying to get that flow. So I think it's really important, you know, from a takeaway point, know what your risks are, know what you're trying to protect. And, you know, you really have to understand that it's everybody. Somebody wrote in the chat that their HR department keeps track and you know, will put out information when people aren't complying with certain things or remind you to, you know, to pay attention to some cybersecurity threats that are out there or participate in training. So yeah, it is not just an IT department function here. I think it's pretty clear. Organizations, nonprofits, you know, they rely really heavily on social media to get their message out. And, you know, someone's asking about moving to the cloud and hybrid workspace. We're going to talk about that in a second. But as far as social media, what are some of the concerns that people should be aware of when using social media? Anybody want to jump in? Destiny, yeah.
And I have a feeling Joseph's going to agree with me on this one. Oversharing information. There is a lot that you can learn about people and organizations from what is put out on social media, on organizational websites, and even people's personal social media. And it's very easy to figure out things about people, both personally and professionally, just by looking at their Twitter feeds. And you can find out information about the organization. You got a new hire. Someone said, hey, I just started my first day at fill in the blank organization, and puts their ID badge in there. Or they tell people a lot about the organization. And a lot of times someone will ask us, how did they know who our HR person was to send that phishing email allegedly from HR and referencing our executive director? And all of that information is found out by looking at social media. And that's not to say that you can't share. Obviously, it is very important for organizations to get their message out through social media. But what you want to do is look at some of the personal information that might be put out there. When you're talking about your mission, that's great. But you want to take into account, hey, when I'm taking a picture of everyone in the team and we've got monitors in the background that might have someone's password posted on it, you have to have just that little bit of extra awareness when it comes to social media. I want to get my message across, but I also want to protect information that isn't necessary to be out there that can be used against us at times.
Right. And Joe, I guess from the donation and social media perspective, what are you seeing as far as some of the top risks?
Yeah, I agree. It's, you know, it's really the oversharing of information, and from both a business and personal perspective, you may put out there on your personal feed, hey, my dog's name is Fido, and all of a sudden your passwords on both home and work is Fido1234. You know, it's very easy for hackers to crack the passwords in that respect. You know, and you get contacted through social media as well from all these people pretending to be, you know, someone who wants to make a donation or wants to help your organization. It's really, that's the world we kind of live in today. You have to be aware of your surroundings and just kind of be wary of people. It's unfortunate, but you have to be a little skeptical when something's too good to be true. Usually it's too good to be true.
Right, absolutely. Jim, I'm just curious from a cybersecurity insurance perspective, does it change at all with an organization that has a lot of presence on social media? You know, has donations from wherever and anything and anywhere. Does that matter as far as the factors of, you know, what's in a policy and what's going to be
Not
protected?
not necessarily. What a common component is to a lot of cyber insurance policies is it's also called media liability. So it's liability arising out of any form of media. So that would also be included. But the concern here, just to echo the other speakers on the panel this morning, is that oversharing of information. The amount of social engineering that's going on, and if you think it's harmless and say, you know, on a business platform to post on social media that the executive director is going away on vacation for 2 weeks. Information like that can be taken advantage of very, very quickly, because if there's any type of financial information going in and out, and they can leverage that information to say, oh, well, you know, maybe I'm away on a trip for an expo, and say, well, we're at this expo and we want to buy new printer equipment, send money here. So it's controlling the information and making sure that you're aware of some of these things that you may put out there and how that would affect you.
So there's a
Shari,
question.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, can I just jump in? Because there was a question about, someone just asked about
Right,
having HR controlling scripts of what people should
Right.
say on their social media accounts. You really can't control what people say on their personal social media accounts, but there are companies I've worked for that have policies and guidelines of what you could post on social media regarding the company. You could certainly put those guidelines out there regarding the company information, and that's acceptable. I mean, really, honestly, you're a representative of the company during the time that you're working for the company during the day, and you have to represent the company in a very respectful way and protected way of their information. So yes, it's okay for that, but not to control someone's social media.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of social media policies that we have an acceptable use in term, you know, for organizations. And as long as you are, as Joe said, keeping it in this is in regard to the organization, not what you do on your free time. But I think it is important to help people get those guidelines, because a lot of times you don't realize that things that you say can be used against you. And that's why policies exist a lot of times, is you don't know what you don't know. And you want to be able to give people guidance to help secure them, particularly when it comes to new hires, freelancers you might be using, volunteers and interns. They're often a forgotten group, even temps, and they are very vulnerable to exploits, because they don't get the training, they don't know the players, they don't know the people in the organization, and they're more susceptible to phishing and other types of attacks because they're just thinking they're doing their job and they've been given no other information.
no, it's a bit scary. There was another question that somebody asked a little bit earlier that took about, it's actually two parts. It's cloud and hybrid workspace. And, you know, moving to the cloud is a way to mitigate risk or to reduce exposure, or possibly not. I think people have to understand what moving to the cloud truly means. And a hybrid workspace, and that's something that we're still seeing. And I don't think it's going to go away, because technology has proven to itself to enable us, just like we are now. We don't physically all have to be together. You know, we can get the work done and be in a hybrid workspace. So there's really actually two components on this thing. Let's start with the cloud, moving to the cloud. And you know, from Jim, from a cybersecurity insurance, you know, how does that factor in, you know, in developing a policy? What's involved in that? Destiny, how does that work from your organization, you know, when you're providing support? And Joe, obviously, what are some of the concerns, you know, what people should be aware of? Jim, maybe start with some of the insurance aspects of cloud.
Absolutely. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. You know, from a perspective of the insurance, what we're looking for is redundancy of your network, right? So it's accessibility to say, if something happens with your local network, or if you're operating locally, something happens to that you have a tested backup, that you know how long it would take to restore. That's one of the big questions that's asked by a lot of the insurance carriers, because they want to determine what's the worst case scenario and how long would you be out of operation if a catastrophic event were to occur. So if you have redundancy or multiple options to spin off and continue work, that's a cloud-based option that's not necessarily tied to your local option, because we've seen, you know, the number of situations I'm sure the other panelists have seen where we have, you know, someone that says, oh yeah, I have a backup, and then they have a ransomware event and it encrypts the backup because it's stored on the local network. As long as there's a separation there and there's no issues between connectivity and you have a second option, that's going to be best practice.
Right, Destiny, I'm just curious from the roles that you provide too, like what are you seeing, where people want to move to a cloud? And what other protections are involved, what is covered, what is not covered as far as from a security protection, and what is the role of the organization? What do they still have to do when they're moving their data to the cloud?
Well, I would say, and this is going to sound a little repetitive, but when you move anything into a cloud-based service or into a SaaS service, when a lot of times when people think of cloud, they do tend to think of things like Microsoft 365, Google, Dropbox, but there are other kinds of cloud-based and web-based services. But in all of those different things, it is going to be like anything else, protecting it. You can take your stuff out of the closet in your house, but you're still protecting your house with an alarm system and locks. If you put it into an external storage facility, the cloud, you still need to have those protections. So the MFA, the training, also making sure that your cloud backend is properly configured, that it is also being backed up by a third party. There's a lot of misconceptions that just because I put something into the Google ecosystem that it's automatically backed up for me. It is not. So making sure that you have backups and that you are doing restore testing. A backup isn't a backup until you've been able to restore it. So it's really thinking through the vetting of the correct cloud solution for what your needs are. Does that solution offer good security controls, good auditing? Then the maintenance of it as people leave the organization and join the organization. Are you looking at their asset controls? Are you making sure that they're not given open access to everything? You still need to apply the same concepts of security and who gets access to what, and good onboarding and offboarding procedures into your cloud environments as well. A lot of times people don't, again, going back to your data categories and your data classification, is people leave an organization and someone forgets, oh, I didn't know they had access to Salesforce. Oh, I forgot that they were the ones who had the admin level access to our WordPress site. So you need to have, again, processes, procedures, good baseline security, backups for business continuity, and whether or not it's local or it's cloud-based, those principles are still going to apply. But one good thing about moving to the cloud is that accessibility that you have. And to Jim's point about redundancy and risk transference, it is now Microsoft's responsibility to keep my stuff up and running. It is not up to me and that 20-year-old server that I've got sitting in the back of a closet somewhere.
Right. We have like 3 minutes left, and I know we could probably talk for another 3 hours. Joe, I'm just curious, some of these laws that are out there, some that are very familiar to both of us, which is Ed Law 2D, which impacts school districts. They're looking to make sure that data, is in an environment that is encrypted and is kept secure, whether it's at rest or at motion. If we're using a cloud service, a lot of our accounting firms use like a portal. Who's really owning that data at that particular time?
Well, you still own the data. I mean, you're transferring, and going back to Jim and Destiny's point, you're transferring the risk. And what does that mean? It just means that you're putting your data in a server somewhere in Minnesota. That's what the cloud is. You're just putting it off your premises. It's not just hanging out there. So you're transferring the risk to that company. They're managing the data, but it's still your data. So you really have to protect your data. You're taking the steps, you're making sure that, and as Destiny said, you want to make sure that they're getting audited. If you're putting your data in, say, AWS or Data, one of these backup services, you want to make sure annually they're getting an audit report done of their controls, not just their financial controls, but their IT controls around protecting your data. That's very important. But on the front end, you have to make sure, right, as Destiny said, you have to make sure the access controls are in place, who has access on the inside of your organization to those services that manage the configurations around the data that's in the cloud services. So yes, even though you're transferring the risk out, there's still steps that you have to do when it leaves your organization, but it's still your data. It's never not your data.
Right.
And it's not the IT department's data, it's the business's data. So when they say, oh, IT department, can you manage this? It's not their job to manage your data. It's really up to the business department, the CFO, the COO, and yes, SOC 2 type 2 reports, because those will have the very detailed COSO controls around all the security controls around your data in those service centers.
Right, right. So we're just about out of time, which is, I figured it was going to go so fast, it was going to make my head spin. I guess there was still talk about hybrid work environment and maybe some security controls still in place. I mean, we talk about VPN not being everything, zero trust. There's a lot. I mean, each of you, if you can, like maybe like 20 seconds, divide it out, you know, Joe, you're on, so maybe just give some, you know, speech, high level speech.
Very quickly, VPN is great. Making sure you're segregating your network.
Right.
Try to instill employees through education that, hey, don't go to a coffee shop and jump on the free Wi-Fi. In your house, try to make sure that your antivirus is up to date. Making sure that you're not leaving your computer open for your kids to jump in or anybody to jump on your computer if you're in public to get your information for your company, because I see that happen all the time. There's things called Wi-Fi pineapples. And what they do is they go into these coffee shops, they go through the Wi-Fi and they're just searching for information on your computer. That's all they do. People do that all day long. People can buy it right on Amazon or any of these websites and they get your information like that. So you've got to be very protective of your data when you're in public.
Right. Destiny, real quick, what do you think, you know, from a hybrid? I saw somebody, what do you need from a security?
Yeah, I would say also keeping systems up to date. Make sure you're running current versions of software. Make sure you're running current versions of your operating systems. Make sure that you're doing your patching and your updating. You know, if you're still working on a Windows 7 machine, talk about internal budgeting to replace your IT. Reset default passwords. If you bought that Wi-Fi router, that's, you know, the link sys fill in the blank model that you can Google the admin password for. You want to change that. You want to make sure that your internal Wi-Fi network has a good, strong password on it. You do want to have things like individual user profiles on shared computers. So when your kids are doing something, they're not messing with your work data. And I also like to say, laptops don't like to eat. Keep the beverages and the pets away from them. You know,
Right.
because if you're not backing up your system, all it takes is that one glass of coffee in the morning. That's going to just wipe out everything.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, we are like about to start with the next session. Jim, I want to thank you. If there's any one quick thing you want to say, I just want to
Absolutely.
thank all
So
of you.
don't fill out 6 applications for your insurance renewal. Pick
Okay.
one that's commonly accepted. Don't go through the effort to go through 6 applications.
Right, right. And some people put some stuff in the chat. I have to thank you, 3 of you, Jim Doran, Destiny Bowers, Joe Horowitz. Thank you so much for, I just think, an amazing session here today. A lot of great information. People check out their websites, check out the guidebook, and have a good rest of your day, a good, safe, and wonderful rest of your day.
Shari, thanks.
Thank you, Shari.
Thank you very much,
you.
Shari.
Thank you, Destiny. And thank you to everybody watching.
Thanks,
today.
everyone. Bye-bye.